Hi, and welcome to another episode of Meghan Opachensky's Study Guide for the NBE. For this episode, I am going to be focusing on the conference's official study guide for the National Board Exams, Volume 12.3, Section Funeral Service Law. Now, before I begin, I just want to do a little opener because I'm a little nervous and a little embarrassed. If I mispronounce or struggle with pronouncing something, please laugh with me, not at me. You know, it can be a little embarrassing, and I admit I've put this one off because I'm really nervous. I've practiced, but it can get me a little tongue-tied, and this is a lot. Like, this chapter is multiple pages of long words, so just bear with me. That's all, okay? Imagine standing, like, this can be so embarrassing. And I was talking to somebody and I said, imagine standing in front of a group of people and reading off things that you know the words, but you get to something that you learned how to pronounce differently, or your region says it differently. You know, we have regional dialects. You mess up, right? And you can't see, instead of being in that room and seeing their reactions and being able to fix it then and laugh it off and learn from it, instead you're speaking to an audience that's listening to a recorded version, and they get to just laugh at your your silly mistake. So that being said, don't give me too much of a hard time if I mess anything up. I'm usually pretty good, but there are a couple of terms that I have only ever read. So I know them only from text. So that usually, phonetics don't always get you in the right direction, okay? So you can tell I'm nervous because I'm rambling. So let's go ahead and just dive in, shall we? All right, so funeral service law. Abatement. A proportional reduction of a legacy under a will when assets out of which such legacy are payable are not sufficient to pay it in full. Actual custody. The physical possession of the dead human body or other property. Ademption. The extinction or withdrawal of an inheritance because decedent did not own the named property at the time of death. Administrative agency, a governmental body created by legislation empowered to regulate and issue rules and regulations. Administrative law, that body of law created by federal and state administrative agencies through implementation of powers and duties in the form of rules, regulations, orders, and decisions. They give examples such as OSHA, the FTC, state board rules and regulations. Administrator and administratrix. Wow, this is one of those, okay? Administrator / administratrix. Got it. The man or woman who is appointed by the court to settle the estate of a decedent who died without a last will and testament. Agent driver. Those drivers under the directions and control of the funeral establishment, which is liable for the driver's negligent actions. Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. You need to be familiar with this one, okay? A federal statute prohibiting discrimination against the disabled in employment, public transportation, telecommunication services, and public accommodations and services operated by private entities. Apprentice, also intern or resident trainee, a person engaged in learning the practice of funeral directing and or embalming under instruction, direction, or personal supervision of a duly licensed director and or embalmer. Bailee, a person who receives personal property from another as a bailment. Now, I highly suggest, I cannot say what I want to say, but from personal experience, I highly suggest you get super familiar with bailee, bailment, bailer, and any of those freaking terms that are similar, okay? Like, I'm a little bitter. I can't tell you why, but I'm a little bitter because they will try to trick you, all right? And so know those exact terms and the way they define them. Because if you know how they're defined in this guide, you will be able to answer their ridiculously worded questions that I may or may not have written really snide commentary for each of when I took my test. So a little bitter. But, moving on before I embarrass myself more with my little hate story there. Might be a little angry with you, whoever wrote those questions. All right. Bailment. A delivery of personal property by one person, the bailer, to another, the bailee, who holds the property for a certain purpose under an express or implied in fact contract. Bailer. A person who delivers personal property to another as a bailment. I know these can get a little tricky, which is why I'm telling you, please make sure you get those straight, okay? Like, I struggled getting those straight. Bequest or legacy, a gift of personal property by will. Body parts, kind of making a jump there. In the Uniformed Anatomical Gift Act, part is defined as organs, tissues, eyes, bones, arteries, blood, other fluids, and other portions of a human body for transplantation. After removal of a body part, without unnecessary mutilation, the custody of the remainder of the body rests with the person who otherwise has the right to control final disposition. I highly recommend, side note, sorry for doing this again, get yourself super duper familiar with all of the different acts, like the Disabilities Act, the Anatomical Gift Act, things like that in your books. You need to make sure you know those. Know the years, just trust me, okay? All right. Brain death. Total and irreversible cessation of all brain functions as indicated by a flat EEG reading. Building code. Laws, ordinances, and government regulations setting forth requirements for construction, maintenance, operation, occupancy, use, or appearance of buildings. Burial also says internment or inhumament. Sorry. The act of placing the dead human body in the ground. Cadaver. A dead human body intended solely for scientific study and dissection. Case law. Appellate court decisions that establish precedented principles. Cemetery. An area of ground set aside and dedicated for the final disposition of dead human bodies. Clinical death. Phase of somatic death lasting from 5 to 6 minutes during which life may be restored. That's important. You want to know the differences of the different phases of death, right? All right. Codicil. CODICIL, in case I did not say that right. It could be codicil. It could be codicil. I have actually never heard that, so I apologize. That's one of those words. An addition or amendment of a last will and testament executed with the same formality of the will. Common carrier. Any carrier required by law to convey passengers or freight without refusal if the approved fare or charge is paid. An example, airline, train, etc. You need to know that. Common law. Non-legislated principles and rules of action predicated upon usages and customs which the court considers binding on the community. Constitution, the fundamental law that establishes the government, limits what government can and cannot do, and states the underlying principles to which the government will conform. Contract, an agreement between two or more competent persons, which is enforceable by law. Contract carrier, this is also important with common carrier, okay? You need to know the difference. Contract carrier provides transportation for compensation only to those with whom it desires to do business with. Okay, so they choose. Constructive custody, the situation whereby a party Yeah, that says that. The situation whereby a party has a right to acquire actual custody or possession of the dead body, although another party has actual physical possession. Okay? All right. Coroner. A public officer whose duty is to investigate cause of death when the question of accident, suicide, or homicide may be evident, or where there was no doctor in attendance. It says, see also medical examiner and justice of the peace. What I'm going to do, so I'll pause here. This is a long section. I did this with a different thing from the glossary of the conference volume 12.3, where I went in and all of the repeated definitions I typed out and put the definitions so that we don't have to flip back and forth. You will get tired of that. It sounds awful and it takes a while. So I will say it, but I will put the thing in the notes. Okay? I got you. So, corpse, also dead human body. The body of a dead human being, deprived of life, but not yet entirely disintegrated. Cremated remains, the final product remaining after completion of the entire cremation and pulverization process. The product is never to be referred to as cremains. If you say cremains, you were taught wrong. Train yourself, because I'm guilty of that. When I started school, I am absolutely guilty of that. I hate to admit it because it's embarrassing. I had a teacher call them cremains. They are cremated remains. Do not call them cremains, okay? I've said that in a couple other episodes. I stand. It's a hill I will die on. Even the conference agrees with that. All right. Cremation. The reduction of a dead human body to inorganic bone fragments by intense heat in a specifically designed retort or chamber. Crematory. The location of the retort or cremation chamber which will perform the cremation process. Crime. An action in violation of Constitution, statutes, or ordinances, such as treason, felony, or a misdemeanor. Now, you're going to need to know the difference between crime and the others. You'll see. Custodian. Status associated with funeral service practitioner or the funeral establishment who becomes legal protector of the dead human body from time of removal until the final disposition. All right, says dead human body, see corpse. Death, the cessation of life. Permanent cessations of all vital functions and signs. It says, see additional definitions in the embalming outline, which I will find that, and like I said, I'll put that in the notes. Degree of kindred. Relationship to decedent of his relatives. Each generation is 1 degree, counting to a common ancestor. Devise. Oh, wait, no. Devise. Devise. I got ahead of myself. Devise, a gift of real estate. The act or process of transferring ownership of real property. Devise applies to both transfers as well as by wills. And here we go with wow, this is bad. It's the same word, Megan. Oh my gosh. I hope you're laughing because this is embarrassing. Divisi. Devise, okay? I'm going to leave that in here so that you guys can laugh because that was painful and that was funny. Usually I edit the really embarrassing ones, but I think you need that laugh. All right. The person who receives real property through the process of a devise. All right. Disinterment, exhumation. The removal of human remains from previous location of final disposition. Due diligence. The attention reasonably expected from and ordinarily exercised by a person who seeks to satisfy a legal requirement or to discharge an obligation. Durable power of attorney. Exists when one person appoints an agent. Agent status which will become or remain effective in the event the original party she should later become incapacitated. Embalmer, a person properly licensed who disinfects, preserves, and/or restores a dead human body. Eminent domain, the inherent power of a government to take private property for public use. In the U.S., just compensation to the property owners is required. Entombment, the placing of a remains in a crypt in a mausoleum. Environmental Protection Agency, also known as the EPA, a governmental agency with environmental protection, regulatory, and enforcement authority. Now, this is one of those, another one of those words, okay? It's spelled ESCHEAT, and Hooked on Phonics says that should be escheat, okay? Forfeiture of a descendant's property to the state in the absence of heirs. Estate, the property of a deceased person, both real and or personal. Estrangement, the physical and or emotional separation for a period of time showing the lack of affection, trust, and regard. Executor and executrix, a man or woman appointed by the will of a deceased person to carry out the provisions thereof and settle the estate. It says, see also personal representative. Exhumation, see disinterment. Federal Trade Commission, also FTC, an agency of federal government created in 1914 to promote free and fair competition by prevention of trade restraints, price fixing, false advertising, and other unfair methods of competition. Final disposition, the conclusive performance of services with respect to the dead human body by one of the legally recognized methods. Funeral director, also funeral service practitioner, a person properly licensed, engaged in, or conducting, or holding himself or herself out as being engaged in the following. Number 1, preparing, other than by embalming, for the burial or disposition of dead human bodies, and or, number 2, maintaining or operating a funeral establishment for the preparation and disposition or for the care of dead human bodies. Funeral establishment, a facility used in the care and preparation for the funeral and or final disposition of the dead human body. Funeral service law, also mortuary law or mortuary jurisprudence, that branch of law which relates to matters concerned with the disposal of the dead and regulation of funeral directors and embalmers and funeral establishments. Funeral service practitioner, see funeral director. General power of attorney, a written instrument authorizing one person to do anything for the principal. In other words, one party has full power of attorney for another party. Gross negligent act, the intentional failure to perform a manifest duty in reckless disregard of the consequences as affecting the life or property of another. Guarantee contract, an agreement whereby the funeral home promises that the services and merchandise will be provided at the time of need in the future for a sum not exceeding the original amount of the aforementioned contract plus any accruals, regardless of the current prices associated with providing the services and merchandise at the time of the funeral. You need to know that. Guardian, a judicial appointment of one person to administer the affairs of another person who is incompetent by virtue of age or legal disability. Heir, H-E-I-R, in case I don't come across the right way there. One who inherits or is entitled to receive property by will or by laws of intestacy. Holographic will. This is important. A will written entirely by the hand of the testator or the testatrix. Householder. The occupier of a house. One who owns or controls real estate where a death occurs. Inheritance, the estate which passes from the decedent to his or her heirs. Inhumament, or burial or interment. See burial. Insolvent estate. The condition of the estate of a deceased person which is unable to pay the debts of the decedent and or the estate. Interment. The act of placing the dead human body in the ground. Intern. See apprentice. Interstate. Between two or more states. Intestate. The state or condition of dying without having made a will. Intestacy. Intestate succession. The method used to distribute property owned by a person who dies without a valid will. Intrastate. Within a state. You're going to want to know the difference. I assume most of us do because, the interstate, like highway, but you want to know the difference between inter and intrastate. You might get that in your lottery of questions. Inventory. Listing and valuation of a decedent's assets by personal representative of the estate. Invitee. One who has been invited on the property by the landowner. Persons coming to a funeral home for the purpose of attending funerals, viewing remains, or engaging the funeral director's services are some examples. Irrevocable contract, another one you need to know. An agreement for future funeral services which cannot be terminated or canceled prior to the death of the beneficiary. Okay? Justice of the peace, a public officer whose duties in some jurisdictions may include, among other things, the investigation of death. See also coroner and medical examiner. Kin, one's relatives collectively, referring to blood relationship. Legally, the surviving spouse is not technically kin. Law, those rules of conduct commanding what is right and prohibiting what is wrong. Legacy, see bequest. Legatee, one who inherits personal property under a will. Liability, responsibility for actions and or other debts, the quality or state of being legally obligated or accountable. Lien, a claim or charge against real or personal property for payment of some debt. There can be no lien against a dead human body, for it is not considered property. Livery, automotive equipment made available for hire. Living will, a document which governs the withholding or withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment from an individual in the event of an incurable or irreversible condition that will cause death within a relatively short time, and which becomes effective when such person is no longer able to make decisions regarding his or her medical treatment. Malpractice, improper or negligent professional act by a professional person. Medical examiner, a forensically trained physician whose duty it is to investigate questionable or unattended deaths, has replaced the coroner in many states. Says also see coroner and justice of the peace. Mental anguish, mental suffering resulting from grief, severe disappointment, indignation, wounded pride, shame, public humiliation, despair, etc., and may be accompanied by physical injury or by an outrageous, intentional, or grossly negligent act. Morgue, a place where dead human bodies are kept until identified and or released for final disposition. Mortgage, a secured loan on a parcel of real estate. Moral turpitude, an act showing inherent baseness or vileness of principle or action, shameful wickedness, depravity. Mortuary law, it says see funeral service law. Mutilation, any altering or change made to a dead human body from the time of death, other than by natural causes. Negligence, failure to exercise ordinary care, omission to do something which a reasonable, prudent person would do under ordinary or similar circumstances, or the doing of something which a reasonable and prudent person would not do. The lack of due care exercised by a wrongdoer who has not acted as a reasonable person would. Another contract that you need to remember here, okay? Non-guaranteed contract, an agreement in which the funeral home promises to apply the amount prepaid plus any accruals to the balance due. However, the cost of the funeral will be based upon the current price for the services and merchandise at the time the death occurs. Okay? Nuisance. A landowner's use of property which interferes with the public or another landowner's use of his property. Nuisance in fact. Acts, occupations, or structures which are not nuisances per se, but may become nuisances by reason of the location or manner in which it is operated. Nuisance per se. Acts, occupations, or structures which are nuisances at all times and under all circumstances. It may be prejudicial to public morals, dangerous to life, or injurious to public rights. Non-cupative will. Oral will declared or dictated by testator during last illness before appropriate witnesses to dispose of personal property and afterwards reduced to writing. This is not valid in all states. Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also known as OSHA, a governmental agency with the responsibility for regulation and enforcement of safety and health matters for most employees. Ordinance, a law passed by a local municipal government governing body, such as zoning, building, safety, etc. Outrageous act, an act with complete disregard for proper conduct which transcends the bounds of common decency. Per capita, the method of dividing an estate by which an equal share is given to each of a number of persons, all of whom stand in equal degree of kindred to the decedent. Personal representative, a person who represents and administers the estate of the deceased persons, executor and or administrator of an estate. Personal service contract, a contract which involves such personal knowledge, skills, or confidence that it can only be performed by the person with whom it is made. A contract whereby both parties should recognize that any breach will usually cause anguish. Now, this is another word that, again, hooked on phonics, might fail me. I'm pretty sure it's per stirpus. So it's per, P-E-R, and then the other word is S-T-I-R-P-E-S. I think it's stirpus. I'm probably wrong. I apologize. Okay, the method of proportionately dividing an estate between beneficiaries according to their deceased ancestors' share. Police power, you need to know this. The inherent power of every government to make reasonable laws to protect the safety, health, morals, and general welfare of its citizens. I can almost guarantee you need to know that. Power of attorney, an instrument granting someone authority to act as agent or attorney in fact for the grantor. An ordinary power of attorney is revocable and automatically terminates upon the death or incapacity of the principal. Precedent, a decision of a higher court, like appellate or the Supreme Court, which is thereafter followed as an example in subsequent similar cases. Preferred claim, a claim which is accorded a priority, advantage, or privilege, a superior claim or right of payment as against another of the same kind or class. The first claim to be paid is the highest preferred claim and superior to all other claims. Pre-funded funeral arrangements, important, okay? Funeral arrangements made in advance of need that include provisions for funding and or prepayment, okay? Preparation room, that portion or location in a funeral establishment specifically designed and equipped for embalming and otherwise preparing dead human bodies. Do not let them trip you up and ask you what that's called, what the proper term is for the room where you prepare a dead human body. If it says like anything like embalming room, it's not called that. It is a prep or preparation room. Do not let them confuse you. It is a preparation room. I don't care what we call it in our free time when we're at work and we want to be whatever. Preparation room. All right, another Important one, pre-planned funeral arrangements. These are funeral arrangements made in advance of need that do not include provisions for funding or prepayment. Priority. Number 1, the order in which claims will be paid when there are insufficient assets to pay all of the claims. Number 2, the order in which certain classes of people have the right to make decisions concerning the disposition of the dead body. Private carrier. This is another important one with the carrier list. Those who transport only in particular instances and only for those they choose to contract with, like funeral home vehicles and livery, okay? Private cemetery. You need to know this. A cemetery owned by a private enterprise, such as a corporation, for-profit, a non-profit corporation, partnership, sole owners, religious orders, etc. Know that, okay? Probate, the process of preserving the estate, determining the validity of a will, and distributing the estate to the proper heirs. Probate court, a court having jurisdiction over estates. Probate estate, the property of a decedent that is subject to administration by the executor or administrator of an estate. Public cemetery, know this, okay? Know this versus private, all right? Public cemetery, a cemetery owned by a governmental unit such as federal, state, or municipal. All right, quasi-contract, a fictional contract created or implied by a court for a person who is unable to contract for himself, such as medical care or death. An obligation which law creates in the absence of agreement, is invoked by courts where there is unjust enrichment. Quasi-property theory, important, okay? The accepted theory of the legal status of a dead human body. Rights associated with the body are as if it were property for the purpose of disposition only. I can almost promise you, you're going to see something that is referring to the quasi-property theory, okay? All right. I'm so sorry. Reciprocity? There we go. Reciprocity. The relationship existing between two states whereby each extends some privileges of licensure to licensees of the other state. Rep. 11. An action to recover possession of wrongfully withheld personal property. Resident trainee, says see apprentice. Restrictive covenant. Provision in a deed limiting the use of property and prohibiting certain uses. Revocable contract. This is important, please know this. Agreement which may be terminated by the purchaser at any time prior to the death of the beneficiary with a full refund of the monies paid on the contract as prescribed by state law. Revocation. The omission or cancellation of an instrument, act, license, or promise. Rules and regulations, enactments by an administrative body within the jurisdiction of that agency. Secured claim, a debt which is supported by a pledge, mortgage, or lien on assets belonging to the debtor. Soldiers and sailors' will, a non-cupative will, informal in nature, in which a soldier in the field or sailor at sea may dispose of personal property only. Solvent estate, an estate in which the assets exceed the liabilities. Springing power of attorney, a written instrument authorizing one person to act as an agent for another effective only upon a certain event occurring. Stare decisis, you're going to need to know this. A policy of courts to stand by a precedent and apply it to all future cases where the facts are substantially the same. To stand by things decided. Statute, a law enacted by a federal or state legislative body. Statutory law, a law created by legislative bodies in contrast to law generated by judicial opinions or case law, and administrative bodies. Testate, the condition of leaving a will at death. Testator, a man who makes a valid will. Testatrix, A woman who makes a valid will. Third-party contracts. Agreements which involve the funeral director or funeral home because the family being served has contracted with someone else or, a third party for services or merchandise also available from the funeral home, such as caskets, vaults, urns, pre-need insurance, etc. Here is another important one that goes with the folkways, mores, etc. Tort. A private or civil wrong other than breach of contract for which there may be action for damages. You want to know that, okay? Trespasser, one who intentionally and without consent or privilege enters another's property. Trust account, an account established by one individual to be held for the benefit of another as a method of payment of funeral expenses. Creates a fiduciary responsibility. Money paid to a funeral home for future services is placed in an account with the funeral home as a trustee for the benefit of another. Trustee, one who holds title to property or another position of trust to a beneficiary in funeral arrangements. The person who has the right to control funeral does so on behalf of all survivors. That is how that's written, sorry. All right, Uniform Anatomical Gift Act, also UAGA. You need to know this, seriously. A law permitting a person of legal age and sound mind to give all or any part of his or her body to take effect upon his or her death, or gives the right to another. Uniform Probate Code, a model law intended to achieve uniformity in probate proceedings throughout the U.S. Unsecured claim, a claim which is not supported by a pledge, mortgage, or lien on other assets. Vital statistics. The registration, preparation, transcription, collection, compilation, and preservation of data pertaining to births, adoptions, deaths, stillbirths, marital status, etc. Volunteer driver. Those drivers not under the control of the funeral director. Will. An instrument executed with required formality by persons making disposition of their property to take effect upon their death. Zoning ordinance, a law passed by a municipality by virtue of the police power which regulates and prescribes the kind of building, residences, or businesses that shall be built and used in different parts of the municipality. All right. Okay, so that will conclude this episode covering the glossary terms from the conference's official study guide, volume 12.3, section Funeral Service Law, pages 74 through 79. I appreciate you bearing with me through any mispronunciations or stumbles, because I did that in one go, and that was one of the longest reads I've done, and that was a lot of long words. So I think I did okay. And like I said, there were a couple that, honestly, it's embarrassing to admit. I'm sure you've been there, but you ever have a word that you've only ever read, you've never actually heard said, so you're not sure if you're saying it wrong because you're doing it phonetically? That's kind of what I did here. And I tried to look it up online, and the AI that read it back to me, it didn't sound too promising. So I just kind of did the phonetics, did my best. So I'm going to totally leave a couple of my goofs in there because maybe they'll make you giggle. I know that this whole studying for the NBE is extremely stressful. So if I can make you laugh a little, I'm a goof, okay? This is, honestly, being serious this whole time can be really hard because I love making people laugh. I love making y'all smile. So if me goofing off and saying something funny and accepting my goofs and laughing makes you smile or just distracts you for a second, that's totally worth it to me. I'll make myself look silly. I'll embarrass myself. I want you to be able to have a moment of, So anyway, this will conclude this episode. I wish you good luck if your exam is coming up soon. Otherwise, I hope you tune in for another episode. I'm trying my best to turn these out as fast as I got that word right. Churn these episodes out as fast as I can, because I've had a lot of people say that they're getting ready to do their exams in the next month or two, and I really, really want to help as many people as I can. So you'll notice, especially like right now, it's 9 o'clock my time, you're going to be seeing a lot of these pop up like when you wake up throughout the night. If you follow my podcast, I get done with work and I'm trying to pound a couple of these out. So that's also kind of why I'm like, ugh, when I do these. But I'm here for you. I'm here for your success. I want you to pass. I want you to become a wonderful funeral director and or embalmer, and just a funeral professional in general. But no, I'm here. If you need anything, feel free to reach out to me. They've got the fan mail thing, or like I said, I'm the only Meghan Opachensky I know of on Facebook, unless someone's copying me. I am here for you. If you have any recommendations, if there's something you want me to dive deeper into, if you have a good Quizlet that you want me to read, anything. I do have a list that I am getting to. I'm trying to kind of hit like the more important things that will help you. And I'm taking a break from the Taggart notes specifically because as I was doing that, I started noticing that as great as they are to read, I just felt like they're not going to prepare you the way I want to prepare you. I want to provide easily digestible, like easy listening, easy to memorize information, because that's what you need to succeed. And I found the Taggart notes as informative as they are not what my goal is with my podcast. I like being able to give you something that you can put on repeat and listen to the definitions over and over again. Taggart notes, it's a lot of information and it's a lot of filler. I'm not going to lie. So I will continue to do them. I will do that for you because so many people want them. But I'm going to take a break and I'm going to get back to this stuff because truthfully, you need these bite-sized information to be able to cram for your exams. Because I know some people have their tests like, next month or a couple weeks. So I want you to be able to digest all of this information easily, and the Taggart notes, in my opinion, just aren't hitting the way I want to. I will do them, just not right now. Okay, we're gonna take a break. So tune in, and I'm not sure what next I'm gonna cover, but we're gonna do another very useful episode, of course. So again, good luck. I hope you have a wonderful night, day, weekend, week, whenever you're listening to this. Please take care. Take a nice deep breath. Try to de-stress. Remember, stress is going to be your biggest, enemy with this. It is not going to be your motivator, because stressing yourself out over this, that's not going to win you any points. Again, I'm here for you. Reach out if you need anything. And otherwise, I think I've covered everything. I hope you have, like I said, have a wonderful day. All right. And thank you again for your support. It really